Good morning and happy Tuesday, everyone. We have another great show planned for you all today. We have all-star panelists Rachel Bovard and Jennifer Holdsworth-Karp, plus Ryan Grimm and Amber Athey are with us today.
But first, we wanted to start out with an exchange between two of our nation's government officials. Jim Jordan took to Twitter, like all great men do, to blast the increasing gas prices over the last year. White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki responded by saying, quote, "You forget to mention gas prices are the same now as they were in June 2018. She went on to say that President Biden agrees Americans shouldn't pay more at the pump and opposes GOP tax proposals to raise the gas tax. So here's what she had to say yesterday about infrastructure talks.
Last I checked, the proposal the president put forward in his initial proposal that has been a part of this discussion to increase investment in tax enforcement, ensure that people who are the wealthiest are paying what they should be paying in taxes, which would raise a significantly larger amount than the gas tax. It does exactly that and should meet his bar.
And to Alex's point, do you want this bill to be fully paid for?
The president has proposed means of fully paying for this package, including the tax enforcement components. He thinks that's a responsible thing to do, and we'll continue to have discussions with members about how we can find a path forward.
Robby, I don't know what you think about this, but I'm not sure as a government official, I would argue with Jim Jordan. Jim Jordan's kind of the equivalent of arguing with a sofa cushion here because he's just like a mouthpiece that never really makes a whole lot of sense. He's comparing gas prices as an average to a time when people weren't using gas. It was during the height of COVID. Nobody went anywhere for a year. So what is this guy actually talking about? And he fails to mention, or Jen actually should have come back at him a little bit, talking about the child tax credit. Say, and by the way, how do you all like those checks you're getting right now to help you take care of your child tax care? However, I am a little bit happy and excited that she decided to take this on to let it not become the overriding narrative. I mean, how about the fact that the economy is growing between 5 and 7% per quarter right now? Per quarter, not per year, per quarter. I don't know. What's your thoughts here about the Jim Jordan dust up?
This was a perfect fight for Twitter, right? Because it's pointless and it's stupid and it's short and it's pithy. Like, you're not really on Twitter, right? I was looking
every
for you.
Now and then. Every now and then.
No, I'm a true addict for it because it's fun to get in people's heads and fight with them. But yes, this is the antithesis of like good government policy of getting things done. That's the problem, I think, with so much of today's GOP in particular. It's a problem for the Democrats too, but honestly, it's more of a problem for the GOP. They just love to be social media trolls, and that is their entire model of how they make themselves more famous, better known, more likely to be on TV. They don't really want to legislate or solve problems or fix our broken government because they're too online. Yeah. Capital T, capital O.
Yeah, I'm with you on this. And look, I have often thought about this, and I just feel like telling a whole lot of our government officials, Republican and Democrat, stop tweeting stupid things.
Yeah.
Start doing real things, which is kind of what's not happening here in this whole Twitter battle. Like, we should be talking about the fact that, gas prices are on the rise. Of course they are. People are using more gas. But what can we do to kind of keep that price from just skyrocketing? So as people face increased inflation, increased prices for a host of things that they need in everyday life, how do we keep the cost of gas down?
Well,
and what policies can we do? What can we propose to actually help with that?
But a lot of times Democrats don't like the answer to that question, which is drill more.
Well, that's fair. And I think there are other things they could do. They can always release, a portion of the Strategic Petroleum Reserve.
Right.
There is stuff that can happen here to actually deal with the problem as opposed to just tweeting back and forth as if it's some kind of online UFC battle, which I think is just pointless. Although I do appreciate the fact that Jen is not allowing this to become the overriding narrative.
Yeah.
Republican gas tax would actually raise prices ridiculously high for working Americans, while progressives are proposing a wealth tax. So we've kind of got a back and forth on gas taxes versus wealth taxes, which makes it even a little funnier that Republican Jim Jordan was complaining about the price of gas.
Right.
I mean, no, come on, Jim. What are you talking about here?
Yeah, I don't like either plan. I don't want a wealth tax or a gas tax. Sorry, libertarian over here. Right. I don't think making working people pay more is going to be the solution. I like to look at how can we deregulate, how can we make it easier to do business in this country. The government so often gets in the way, and I think that's a problem.
Yeah, I don't necessarily disagree with that.
Another bipartisan meeting is expected to take place this week. The White House has also reportedly held private meetings with Democratic Senators Joe Manchin and Kyrsten Sinema. Both have insisted on a bipartisan deal on infrastructure.
Well, look, Joe Biden came into his presidency and he campaigned on as a guy, because of his time in the Senate, who could get things done in a bipartisan manner. And people want things to be bipartisan. I think they're very doubtful about whether or not they'll actually be, but they want that. They want a government that fundamentally functions. The question is, who are the winners and losers in this bipartisan deal, right? Like, clearly nobody is going to be happy when this thing finally either potentially passes or Joe Biden goes against it and moves into, voting for this infrastructure bill in a reconciliation process. It'll be interesting to see how this thing plays out and where Sinema and Manchin actually are on it in the end in this bipartisan deal of, I think, 21 senators who are working.
Yeah, they're in this fascinating position along with a couple people on the right, Susan Collins, Mitt Romney, et cetera, who are actually doing policy. Anything could happen. Yeah. Everyone else, so many other people on both sides are just kind of stuck in their narrow dogmatic worldview. And again, their incentive is to complain about everything and not do anything. Actually, the infrastructure debate is an example of this with liberals and with Democrats a little bit, because you have so much. I don't know if you've seen all the tweets that X is infrastructure. Feminism is infrastructure. Racial justice is infrastructure. Just like an activist effort to kind of derail doing actual infrastructure and just making it about a bunch of kind of woke activist things that is not what Congress is talking about.
Yeah, I haven't actually seen that. But what I can say is that, the infrastructure bill was a big part of Biden's plan here. And I think that it's important that he gets things done, because I think the reality of what we have to look at here is, maybe after we come back after August recess, not all that much starts to happen because people are in campaign mode, right? And
right.
Republicans are certainly trying to flip one or both houses of Congress here, and they've got a good shot, especially with redistricting on the congressional side, putting Democrats at a distinct disadvantage. Biden has to get some stuff done now, I think, functionally, and also so that Democrats can point back to what they've done. Yeah. Right? I mean, they've got to run into these races with something just beyond the American Rescue Plan, which was helpful and people love, right. But there's got to be additional things here. Look, we had all control of all the houses of government. Here's the argument that we're making why we should keep that.
Right. Right. Yeah. They need. The Democrats can't just count on everything's going better just because the pandemic is ending, and there's a narrative where we're all doing better, but it's not because anybody did anything. It's because the most horrible chapter in our lives is finally closing, mostly of its own accord. And I don't know that that's going to be enough for Democrats to convince voters to let them, keep Congress.
Well, let's hope that we're right about the, one of the most difficult chapters in American history closing. I'm with you on that. What's interesting here is Senator Manchin plays hardball in D.C. over infrastructure negotiations. Many of his constituents in West Virginia don't even have access to clean drinking water. So, okay, I want to make this a bipartisan deal, and I want to peel some things out of this. But by the way, the things that my constituents actually need are in this bill, and people are drinking runoff water off of rocks in West Virginia. I mean, I don't know. It doesn't strike me as being all that responsive to what your constituents actually need.
Yeah, I mean, fixing infrastructure is hard, I guess, in the defense of, not to defend our authority figures, the people not, taking adequate care of their citizens and the people of this country. But fixing infrastructure is hard. Replacing our lead pipes, our water pipes, that's something that's very important that needs to be done on a much more widespread basis. It takes a political will to do it. It takes money. It takes people to actually work and dig holes in the ground and replace those things. And, just kind of getting things done is a hard sell these days. Everything is kind of crumbling and falling apart, and we don't have this sort of unity or this drive to fix things like that.
Yeah, but we should.
We should.
But we should. I mean, this is one thing that whether you're a Republican or a Democrat, you should be able to come together on and say that this is a patriotic duty to make sure that the roads and bridges that we drive on daily are up to code. And not only that, we should be expanding them so that we don't lose in the kind of transportation competition with China, who can move things all around a large country as well. As they're building 8, 10, 15-lane highways, we're here arguing over whether or not we should, repair a bridge that's been there for 60 years. Yeah. Come on, this is a patriotic duty. People should stop playing politics so hard with it and actually take care of people and invest in the future of this country, right? How are we going to have a country that is fundamentally, growing its economy and growing its ability to continually do things if we're not making the investments in the base that enables these things to actually happen? And not only the base of roads and bridges and things like that, but things like, broadband that is widely accessible all across the country, even in rural areas, which oftentimes lack that, or in urban areas where it's just poor, right? Like it's essentially the speed of dial-up modems, and people, and we talked about it yesterday. Look, more people are working from home and have a hybrid work environment, but they don't have the access to those jobs. People are complaining about, companies are complaining that they can't get enough workers, and some of the positions they're trying to fill are potentially remote, yet people who are in rural areas don't have access to that. Get this thing done.
Well, we may have overdone it on the incentivizing people not to work, though. In the D.C. area where we are, it's hard to get people to do jobs because they're collecting unemployment and they have all sorts of incentives not to. That has been an issue. I think it's been a bigger issue than Democrats necessarily counted on. We want people, we don't want to pay people not to. Obviously, we had to help people during the pandemic. It was a horrible time, I get it. But people need to work, and then they deserve fair compensation for that, and that's how it should be.
Yeah, look, I think most people want to work. I think when you're just paying them a minimum wage that keeps them below the poverty level, you run into this problem where, well, yeah, I'll take that up, at some point in time, but right now I don't have a real impetus to work because they're not paying me anything. I think, we talked about the minimum wage here and different ways to get to it, but we definitely do need to raise the ability for working people to earn enough money to not live in poverty. It's a pretty simple thing. Look, what's also going on here is that the enhanced child tax credit is about to come out and will deliver $300 per month for every child 5 and under, and $250 per month for every child 6 to 17 starting on July 15th. However, some advocacy groups say it's not mobile friendly and requires an email address, something that America's poorest families may not be able to access, and it's also still only in English.
Meanwhile, the Biden White House is defending its hiring practices, following reports that at least 5 children of Biden aides have received jobs with the administration.
Let me say first that we have the highest ethical standards of any administration in history. A number of ethics officials have conveyed that, and we're proud of that. We have also staffed up at an unprecedented pace, and this is the most diverse administration in American history. So we certainly expect that everyone will abide by those high ethics standards. That applies in how we operate. It also applies in how hiring is done.
So first, I think we should, take on the child tax credit, because I think this is a concern here. I think the child tax credit is a good thing and is going to be extremely beneficial to families, especially those who, as we have discussed, are trying to get back to work. Because a lot of that problem, as we've said before, is childcare, right? It's incredibly expensive. It's hard to access, and in some cases, is just a restriction to them actually being able to make it back into the work environment, especially now that schools really aren't open anymore, right? We're in the summer, and unless you're in summer school, right, like kids are home. Where are they? And summer camps aren't open, et cetera, et cetera. It's a problem when there's a group of people who need access to this child tax credit, but in order to sign up to it, you actually have to have an email address and access to the internet. So I don't know what you think about that.
I mean, that strikes me as typical government incompetence. Government is not good at doing a lot of things, including making people aware of the resources it is giving to them.
Sure.
The child tax credit, I don't know. I'm not in love with it. I would rather just give families the money. So, there's per pupil funding in school districts. Mm-hmm. I would rather just give families that money. In some school districts, it's like tens of thousands of dollars. You can just have that money instead of the school district getting it, and then you can choose whatever educational option you want for your kids. If it's homeschooling, fine. If it's a public school, it's fine. If it's a private school, it's fine. If it's some pod-based thing where your kid and a couple of his friends and you teach them some days, or you get a babysitter to do it, whatever, that's fine with me. You work it out. No judgment here. I would let families decide. Just give people money and let them decide. We don't need some complicated government program for it.
Yeah, I mean, it's essentially, I don't necessarily disagree with the fact that, people should be able to decide what they're doing with their own money. And when it comes to taxes and tax credits, I think that's absolutely right. However, the real problem here is people can't access it, and also for an administration that is fundamentally diverse, and this really kind of aggravates me personally as someone who is of Hispanic descent, they don't have it in Spanish. And a good portion of the people that are going to need access to this child tax care credit may not be able to fundamentally understand the portal that they can go to sign up for this, even if they can get there, And one important thing to really note here, and something that has to be fixed, and I would argue fixed immediately, is they noted that it's not mobile friendly. Well, how many of us are accessing the internet via our mobile phones first, before our computers? I certainly am. Most of the time, the majority of communication I have or research I'm doing is actually on the phone. I think a lot of people are the same way. And so if it's not mobile friendly, and it's not in multiple languages, you've got a real disconnect there. I also think that it's kind of important to talk a little bit about this hiring practices and family members being hired in the administration. I'd love to hear your take on where the Biden administration is with this, and how it relates to our previous administration.
Yeah, I mean that's the thing, right? I mean, this is perfect hypocrisy, kind of, because I'm sure this will be a great talking point for conservative pundit type people. But if there's nepotism going on here in a there very well may be, and I'm against it. It doesn't even hold a candle to what the Trump administration was doing, hiring literally people named Trump. So it's now. Biden has promised to do better than Trump. Obviously, he wants to distinguish himself and be different than the previous administration in every way. So I don't think it sends a lot of confidence that they were doing a similar thing. But no, it's not quite the same.
No, I mean, come on, man. This is like the most hypocritical thing ever. And look, I'm with you. I'm against nepotism. I think it's a bad thing. I think it's just fundamentally not meritocratic, right? It's like who you were born into dictates whether or not you can actually be hired for a certain position. And that's BS. I'm against all that.
John Kennedy made his brother Attorney General, though.
Well, this is true, and I don't want to go back 50 years here. I'm talking about present day. And what strikes me as hilarious about this is Jordan Kushner was going to negotiate the Palestinian-Israeli peace negotiations, right? And he was hired as a key advisor. This is kind of ridiculous. But look, it's great to be with you again. We'll tell you what's on our radars next.